back to what you asked earlier. We're not trying to fill every corner of every space of design. We're trying to do good design.
All right, right here.
I have just a general curiosity of my own. About 4 years ago, me and my friends started playing Star Wars Saga. And I read the rules and I go, wow, I hope they're using some of this in the same direction as new 4E I keep hearing about. By 4E, and lo and behold, so I know which was released first, but which came first, the chicken or the egg? Did everyone go, hey, this new Star Wars stuff would go great with Dungeons and Dragons?
A lot of it is, we touched on this a couple of years ago, actually. Saga really was a snapshot of what the fourth edition game looked like at the time. Saga came out first, right? Or, yeah, right.
We were testing the waters with
but,
stuff we were working on.
You know, a lot of the core concepts we were looking at, you know, worked themselves right into the Saga game. And in fact, there was a big revision that Chris Perkins did on the game to help bring all those, you know, integrate a lot of those mechanics into that before the game's release. So yeah, it's something that, you know, anytime we're working on a game, and you know, like for example, we were working on Gamma World and Dark Sun, and those concepts and things that we see in those games and other projects we've worked on find their way into D&D. The ones that are cool that we think, hey, you know, this could really add to D&D. We want to try to make that part of the game too. So, you know, we'll hopefully continue to see that.
I kind of figured that the question had been asked before. I just didn't.
Sure.
The Player's Handbook 3, all of the races had options on the attributes.
Yes.
And I loved that. And I partially thought in my head maybe the Essential line are going to do the same thing for the races that we currently have. Is there any more thought to going back and adding choices to current races?
Yes. The question is, because the Player's Handbook 3 debuted the idea of having ability scores for races have one primary stat and then a second stat that you could choose one of two to actually increase. So Minotaurs were like strength and then either con or wisdom, yeah. So, and that choice makes for interesting characters. It broadens the appeal of certain races because you can then take more classes with those. It really, you know, provides more options for players, which, you know, everybody thinks is cool. And the short answer is yes, we do intend to apply that to our designs going forward, and the Essentials races all have that tech built in. So if you're an Eladrin now, you'll have int, but then you'll choose between something and something. Dexam and Charisma, I don't remember.
Sneak peek that no one else is doing yet right now?
I don't. It might even be in the character builder now. I don't remember. When's the update?
Did we? I don't remember if it was done in the last update or it's going to be in the next update, but it will be.
Yeah.
It will be official for all races moving forward.
Yeah. Let's go over here real quick.
Definitely a lot of really great ideas come out of design and development. Do you guys have any insightful stories about some ideas that got sort of left on the floor of the room?
So the question is, were there any bad ideas that we've ever had? Oh no, they're bad ideas. But yeah, the open-ended question about, you know, what sort of stuff comes in and doesn't go out is a question. There are a number of things that we've done. At every stage, we question whether a particular element is cool enough and interesting enough, and in many cases, we do replace stuff, right? And we'll take out Paragon Paths or powers and get new ones in. I'm trying to think of specific examples right now, and I know that there are many, but I'm not sure what they are right now. Rich, you remember something that was your pride and joy that I tore apart?
The funny thing is we spend a lot of time fixing stuff rather than replacing stuff, mostly because our deadlines are such that we are really strongly incented to try to salvage something that comes in and is not doing what we want, rather than say, you know, it just didn't work, pitch it and try again. I mean, there are definitely, you know, things I can think of that have been left on the cutting room floor over the years. A long time ago, like leading up into 3rd edition, until relatively late in the process, we had a character class called the Spirit Master that was going to be a third arcane spellcaster that worked a little bit more like a little bit like the Shire from old Al-Qadim stuff, a guy who casts spells by basically using kind of scary spirits to do it for him, because we were on this kick of the idea of that so much of the D&D books were devoted to the sheer real estate of describing arcane spells. Having more classes that use that resource was just kind of a smart way to use the book. That's essentially where the third edition Sorcerer came from, was an idea of, well, this is kind of silly that we have 40% of the book devoted to one character class. Can somebody else play with these things, please? But as it turned out, we looked at it and thought about it and eventually benched the Spirit Master because we said, nobody knows what a Spirit Master is. Nobody has an expectation of what this class would be. No one out there is saying D&D would be great if only they had a spirit guy kind of class, right? It just wasn't out there. So and the book was already filling up. You guys remember how packed that third edition handbook was? Holy cow, we couldn't have gotten in with a shoehorn. That was one I always was kind of fond of, and we kind of laughed because the gnome had been on the bench until pretty late in the process, and somehow or another, the gnome managed to weasel his way onto the playing field at the expense of the Spirit Master's playing time, and that little guy has now been in for 2 solid editions, and Spirit Master is still waiting for his turn on the bench.
Another example of something that actually also happened in third edition that I got to be on 2 sides of. I worked as a freelance designer on a book called Magic of Incarnum, which some number of people might have bought, small number of people. But it was really fun to work on. It was my second project. I think I was really excited to do it, and the whole point was going to be that we were going to create this new magic system that dealt with like the stuff of magic and this sort of element that was magic incarnate. And we wrote a whole bunch of mechanics for what classes might use Incarnum, and what would happen if you made alloys of Incarnum with other materials. So, I wrote a whole bunch of stuff about what Mithril and Incarnum created, and what Adamantite and Incarnum created, and all of these specific examples of stuff. And then I got a job working on the development team for Wizards, and one of the first projects I had, one of the first major projects I had, was working on the Incarnum book again, because the development team, which initially I wasn't on that particular project because I had worked on design. We try to keep a little bit of separation there where we can, but had determined that there was so much class stuff there for this book that it was really a book on its own. And we ended up taking all of the design, we had a tremendous amount of design for that work, and slicing it right down the middle and keeping all the class stuff and all of that alloy stuff that I slaved hours and hours trying to hit my deadline to make sure I got it all done. All that was gone. We saved it off into a file, put it on a server somewhere, and then made the rest of the class-based Incarnum stuff the focus of that book. That's probably the most drastic change we've had in the last 7-8 years, but and so we really haven't had anything that comes close to that. Right? We might throw out Paragon Paths or something smaller scale, but yeah, occasionally it happens. Mayor.
Do you have anything during the design process that is still cool, but doesn't really necessarily fit in the product that might get spun off into another product or used somewhere else? Does that happen? And do you have an example of that? 'Cause I can see where you have something this is cool, but it doesn't fit with the other mechanics, or you can't play it,
Sure.
but you still want to use it.
Yeah, the question is, do we have mechanics that we want to use that either are thematically cool or mechanically cool that we want to try to find a place for? And I think the answer is yes. And Rich, you want to?
Yeah, it's actually fairly routine for us to take like Paragon Paths, for example, and look at them and say, these couple are just not, fitting in with the book. We're going to move them and save them later. Not unusual for like a book will come in. We thought we were going to do like 3 character races in it, and we'll say, we're save one of these races and match it up with something else in a different book. Really? Can I? Can I really? I kind of buried that. That was a. So.
When Bill came and said, "Do this."
Yes. So in the case of the Dark Sun books, obviously this year at the show we have the campaign guide and we have the creature catalog. In our original design for the setting, we had a campaign guide and a player's guide. We basically set them up to follow the 4th edition Forgotten Realms and 4th edition Eberron models, segregating all the player information into a player's guide and all the DM information into a campaign guide. Working to that model, I had basically finished up my design work on Dark Sun. I was lead designer for that team. So I kind of pulled it all together and had it in one spot. And right before it's going to go to development, we took a step back, look at our strategy, and said, you know, we think the right way to go is to carve off, is to group up the player information with sort of the campaign geography stuff. So basically, to make the book look more like the 3rd edition Forgotten Realms hardback, where you've got the player generation, character generation, and world description stuff in one spot, and in one volume, and then create a creature catalog, which had like all the critters, because that book was originally had almost like 80 or 90 pages worth of monsters already. It was almost a book in and of itself. Was the monster chapter that we had come up with. Literally on the day I was going to turn it over to development, Bill explained that we're going to have a slight redirection here. We're going to carve the books up completely differently, change sizes a bit, move stuff around, and so I then spent the next 6 or 8 weeks working furiously to take stuff that I'd gotten done together that fit very nicely into a very precise outline and was exactly where I wanted it, and carve it all up and throw it into one spot or the other spot, and change chapters to fit, and generally scramble to shift the format from the one we had designed to the one we eventually published in. Now, while I griped about it at the time, I think, if you guys have seen the book so far at the show, I think it's a couple of great looking books. I'm very proud of them. And we probably made for example, like the geography section of that book better by virtue of the fact that, hey, we're going to spend less time really exploring areas of Athos that no one's going to go to. Let's kind of focus in on what's important and what's really relevant, and arm the DM as best we can to run games there. But yeah, it was quite a scramble, and I had to work with Steve because we needed to have a bit of a rolling turnover, where I was like, okay, Steve, here's the character stuff I think is not going to change, which is essentially most of the theme stuff. You guys start working on this in development because I got to take the geography chapter, I got to take it back and keep working on it. One of the nice things about development, the process is you can segregate off. Sometimes, like, hey, give me this class, give me these couple of classes, give me these monsters here. We can work on those as units while design can still proceed on other stuff, or redesign in this case. But it does make our jobs a little bit more complicated because then we have to start really, keeping track of who's got what. Make sure we're not both working on the gnome at the same time. Stuff like that.